Hey pen fans, Brian Goulet here from gouletpens.com, here for another Goulet Q&A, episode number 326. This is where fountain pens are still a thing. Today I'm going to be talking about what causes feedback on your nib aside from misaligned tines. How do we do all of our pen measurements here at Goulet Pens for our tech specs? Spoiler alert, it's a lot of steps. And if Sheaffer purple ink dries as fast as the coffee ink did in the last video, and then I'm going to be spotlighting the new Platinum Curidas special editions. So it should be a good time. I have a lot of feedback, so let's get right into it. All right, y'all have been very vocal in the comments, and I am loving it. Keep it going. Let's see here. No Regrets Guitars says, Brian, great video. For those of us who are spreadsheet challenged, can you make available for download a copy of your spreadsheet for us to catalog our pens? Maybe. I'm working on it. It's complicated. I have to find a way to be able to do that. And like, where do I put it? And how do I make it downloadable so that you can edit it? I don't know. There's some technical stuff I got to figure out. And I got to clean it up a little bit because there's some stuff in there that's like specific to me that may not be as relevant for you. So yeah, I'm definitely inclined to do that. I just need to figure out how to do it and then have the time. So it is noted that there is interest because you're not the only one that commented. So let me figure that out and then I will let you know once I've got it done, but you might have to give me a few weeks. All right. Liza Smullen says, can you add chapters to this video, please? I appreciate being able to skip to the featured product section. I keep going back to the translucent Magna Carta demonstrated in episode 310, for example. Still saving up. That's awesome. Love the Goulet Pencast and Q&A and all you do for the community, the pen community. Awesome. Long-time customer and viewer and listener. First time commenting publicly, since I thought it might help others who also use chapters. Well, I do hope I pronounced your name correctly because I feel like I could have messed it up. Okay, so these are great questions. The chapters. I know we do timestamps. I thought the timestamps automatically created chapters. Maybe that's different. I don't know. You'd think I would know everything about YouTube at this point, but I got to look into this a little bit. So whatever I can look into, if I can make chapters happen. I think chapters are automatically created, but maybe when we create the timestamps, it overrides the automatic chapters. I thought it did both. Because I have the option for chapters to be created, selected on there. So I don't know. I will look into that. Either way, we do have timestamps, so you can skip right to it. But if chapters are something different or unique, I'm going to do some homework. So thank you for the prompting. I will look into that. Let's see here. Blue Ren 65 says, you are correct about the auto dub function on YouTube, talking about having foreign languages and then making my mouth look like I'm speaking the foreign languages. I was not wild on the idea. And y'all are also not wild on it. I got several comments. So Blue Ren says, one thing I will say is that if I see YouTube videos from someone in another country that is auto-dubbed, I will automatically click don't recommend channel. Yikes! I would far rather hear that person speaking in their own language and read the subtitles. And I do. Films dubbed using great actors are truly horrible, so YouTube auto-dubbing is another level of hell altogether. Auto-dubbing dehumanizes the creator of the channel, in my opinion, and I cannot stand the ridiculous AI syntax. Most people seem to not notice when something is AI dubbed, but anyone with an ear for language can hear immediately when words are oddly clipped short or there are strange connections between words. It's horrible. And see, that's what I'm worried about, especially if it's in a foreign language. I couldn't even review it. You know what I mean? Not that if I did that, I would even be able to do anything about it. So my instinct was kind of right. Maybe it'll get better. I don't know. Maybe it'll get to the point where we all get so used to it that it won't bother us anymore. It used to be that way on YouTube with jump cuts. You know, it used to be that you had to have like very complete phrases. And if you jump cut in the middle of sentences, it seemed really choppy and really jarring. But that's so much the norm now on YouTube. You know, we definitely do it for other videos that we have. But you know, on Q&A, I just ramble on and on. So y'all get the unfiltered version, unless I like have to have some bodily noise that's not meant for human ears to hear. And we'll cut that out. So I might jump cut there. Bartos Do says, auto dubbing is not only horrible because of the voice quality and poor translation, it kills all emotions and passion that you put into your message. My native language is not English, and auto-dubbing in YouTube is a really painful feature in both directions because it forces me to use one language only. I avoid channels which use auto-dubbing. And then Wicho 727 says, please, please do not turn on the auto dubbing. It's really fake. And as a viewer, I can't change it in the app. It's forced to the language of your entire Google account, whatever that's set. Okay, so, well, I'm not going to do auto dubbing. I already didn't want to, and y'all absolutely confirmed that. So, it's interesting. A lot of this AI stuff is just being thrust upon us, and we're essentially like the beta testers now. Like they might test some things, but I imagine it's going to be buggy, and they just kind of roll with it. So much is speed oriented in the AI world that it's just being like forced upon us, and we're like, oh, this is garbage, but we are being given it anyway, and we will see. And then like way down the road, it's like, okay, this is not now terrible. Anyway. Let me tell you how I really feel about it. I'm kidding. Moving on. Hockey Bum 2033 says, I've been waiting for the Lord of the Rings pen set release for the longest time, and the Ring Bearer set is already sold out. I know, I'm such a tease. Any chance you'll be getting more sets in stock? Yes. We are going to be restocking, though honestly, I have no idea what the demand on these is going to be. So I apologize for things going out of stock pretty quickly. We're going to try and get more in, though. So hang tight. It's coming. And then G50 says, something about these Lord of the Rings pens seems very fishy to me. Main thing, the reason is on Kickstarter of all places. Something tells me those guys will get sued due to copyright issues. I don't know about that. I don't know where you're coming from with that. But it's Ferris Wheel Press. So they have their own listing. So it's not some rando throwing it up on Kickstarter. It is Ferris Wheel Press that put at least the Ring Bearer one up on Kickstarter. And it looks like it has done rather well. So, it's a little weird. We're like sort of competing with our own manufacturer, but what they made the pen. So, the fact that they're doing it on Kickstarter, which is, they're selling it direct on Kickstarter, which, that's their business decision to do so. So they're, also selling through their distribution chain, which includes us. So that's fine. We'll have what we have. We'll have all the, I don't think they're selling everything on Kickstarter. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe they use that to help fund, I don't know, the inventory buy-up or something like that. Kickstarter as a whole platform is a very interesting case study. And it's definitely a lot of people in the, a lot of like more startup kind of companies in the pen world will start out on Kickstarter. But anyway, copyright wise, I don't know, because they have the official license. So I don't think it's a copyright issue, and it is their own listing. So it's not like who's going to sue them. You know what I mean? If you're talking about like a trademark issue, like with Lord of the Rings, it seems like they have permission. I don't know the ins and outs of that. I don't know if they have like specific channels, it depends. When you're licensing something, sometimes it's very specific as to what you can license and where and how you sell it and all this kind of stuff. I don't know the ins and outs of their agreement, if that's an issue, but inherently it doesn't throw up like huge red flags for me because it is all the official stuff from the manufacturer. So anyway, got two more pieces of feedback. So Gabriel Stevens talking about the Sheaffer Legacy nib. The first issue Sheaffer Legacy was inspired by the PFM, Pen for Men, which was, I think that was from like the 50s, which was the first pen that Sheaffer released with the diamond-shaped inlaid nib back in 1959. There you go. The Imperial followed soon after. So there was a comment last week saying maybe it could be called the Imperial nib, but Gabriel Stevens had more to add. So the Imperial followed soon after, some models essentially being slimmed down versions of the PFM. It would be erroneous to call it the Imperial nib when the Imperial wasn't the first pen to sport it. Additionally, some models within the Imperial lineup didn't even use the inlaid nib. That is interesting. Yeah, I don't know that there's any one pen that only used that inlaid nib, because I saw some Legacies that didn't have it either. I don't know. But anyway, there's so much Sheaffer history. I don't pretend to know it all, but you could argue like, oh, should it be the pen that first used that nib, or should it be the pen that was most popularly known for using that nib? I don't know. How about we just call it the Sheaffer inlaid nib, or the diamond nib? I've never heard of that, but the diamond shaped inlaid nib, that works too. All right, and then Jingle Lion. No, Jujinge Lion? I don't know. Apologize for butchering that. I use many colors, and I didn't have the feeling that yellow or orange inks are being much drier in general. So I'd asked about, are yellow inks drier in pens? Especially the apricot ink for the Pilot Petite is very wet, but the crystallization, I don't know the correct term there. It's that works. Or like the, crustacean that creates on there, the crustiness that builds up, barnacles. It's a problem the more yellow than an ink has. Rower inclinator helianthus crystallized heavily in my capless, but not such a problem with the Roshizuku's Toro. So I think the Toro must be way wetter than helianthus. But this might also depend on the general temperature and weather conditions. Maybe it becomes drier before it starts crystallizing. I think cold weather is not so optimal for yellow inks, but that's just based on my experience assumption. Oh boy, we're talking about crystallization now. I think that has more to do with specific dye components. I don't know if it's dye components related, specifically correlated with colors, but I do find that like a lot of reds and oranges tend to like crystallize, like crust up more on the nib. Especially the oranges, I feel like. There's definitely some reds that do it pretty hardcore though. But yeah, I haven't personally had that happen as much with yellows. So your mileage may vary. I don't know. There's probably a correlation between some of these things, but it's one of these things where there's like so many different factors. Who knows? So in some people's experience, it tends to correlate with different weather, different colors, whatever, but I don't know. It seems to me like there's so many different factors that if it's not all happening the same to everybody, then there's probably too many factors involved to nail it down. All right, that's all I got for feedback. That was plenty, wasn't it? Let's do some new stuff. Monteverde green-black pen cases. So yeah, we have these, and I actually wanted to show these a little bit because I'm keeping some for myself, and I have them right here. They literally just had them in my box, my inbox. My team dropped it off. So I have not handled them very much. Here we go. We got three different sizes. We have a 12, a 24, and a 36 slot pen case. It looks... I gotta say, it's they call it vegan leather. It's pretty good fake. It does not smell like leather because it's not leather, but the feel is pretty good. It doesn't feel like plasticky. Did a good job with it. Okay, so this is new. It's got a little whatever thing in there. It's got a flap that folds up, which is nice. There are some cases that have a flap in the middle, but then you can only ever see one half of your pens. So even though this is like, why is this flap coming up here? And this is just like a plastic sleeve or whatever. There you go. Nice felt type. I don't know what this material is. I don't know if it's felt. It's like a velvety kind of a material. I don't know what you call this, but it's a little fuzzy, a little bit fuzzy, right? The only downside to these cases is that they only have one elastic band, which is unfortunate, but that's the way they do it. It's not a total deal breaker, and these are definitely pen cases on the more affordable side. This 12 slot case is $25, which is really good, especially on like a per pen basis. I'm just going to throw a few pens in here so you can get a sense of how they fit. Let me see. What do I have that's like bigger? I think I have, I got my custom Urushi, which is going to be a honker. So let's throw that thing in here just so you can get a sense of its overall size. Here we go. Okay. This is both long and girthy. There you go. Yeah, that works. Let me see if I throw it on the other side here. How well is it going to close when I have giant pens across the way? Ooh, that gets a little tight right there. Let me move that clip sideways. Sometimes you have to turn the clips because the clips, when they're up, just adds extra thickness. Okay, so it's a little stiff at first, but it'll zip close just fine. So yeah, if you load this thing up with giant pens, it might get a little tight, but I imagine it'll bend. I don't know if you have to break in fake leather. Probably not the same degree as regular leather, but it'll bend over time. So, I mean, for $25, not too bad. And then the other ones are going to be kind of similar, so I'll go ahead and show them anyway. I had the packaging here, so this is kind of nice. Comes in a little box. The box, it's kind of thin, so it might get beat up a little bit, but it's really just meant to kind of protect the case itself, keep it from getting shelf worn and whatnot. So here you go. Here's the 24. So it is like having two 12s stacked on each other. So I guess they could have done it like landscape format here and had a bunch of stuff, but then that would be kind of weird. Yeah. Or I guess if they had made it longer, then it would be like really super long. So I guess this is the way to do it. There you go. Let's get that plastic out of there. So this one, you end up kind of stacking your pens, so it's How are we doing like height-wise? Let's see if we have one up there, one down here. Okay, got to kind of maneuver it a little bit, but that still fits. Some pretty good-sized pens. You know, this is a Monteverdi MP1, which is a fairly normal, maybe slightly longer pen. And the custom reissue is a monster, so that one will stress test anything. Yeah, okay, so there's your 24. Not too bad. That's only 35 bucks. Even better price per pen. And then the big one, the 36. Again, it all looks the same. So it's like black on the back, and then it's got green. Black and green is like Monteverdi's color scheme. So that's why they did it that way. But it looks nice. It's a nice looking green. Here you go. So now this is just like two of these next to each other. There we go. Boom. Right? Well, not two quite exactly. It's 50% bigger, right? Because it's 36. This one's 45 bucks. So this is your best pen per dollar storage solution. It's going to be similar dimensions to the 24. So you can stack pens on there. You know, again, the only thing is if you have like really expensive pens, you know, like this pen's pretty durable, but it is pricier. So I may still kind of keep this in my, you know, more individually slotted case. But you could certainly keep, you know, a whole bunch of TWSBIs and Monteverdis and stuff like that in a case like this, and it's perfectly fine. But, you know, it's totally up to you. But yeah, there you go. There's the whole collection. They look really nice. All right, we also have a new ink. This is the Waringall Narcissus and Goldmund ink. This is a $27 ink, which is, you know, it's more on the premium side, but it is a really cool looking ink. It's got a black base with some gold shimmer. It is inspired by the contrast in Hermann Hesse's Narcissus and Goldmund. So intellect versus free-spirited sensitivity. There you go, if you want the meaning behind the ink. Oh, but it's a cool looking black ink with gold shimmer. And then we have the last thing. This is a crazy nice looking pen. Sailor King of Pens. This is part of their bespoke series. So not the easiest to get your hands on these ones. This is going to be the Tamenuri Rodin Nami. So it's a limited edition, very limited. I don't know the total number of these actually, but it's limited. So this is a Urushi Rodin pen. Very cool looking. Not a lot of them available. The medium and broad nib, I think, is what we're going to have for both of those. And it's that big Sailor 21 karat nib, that King of Pens nib, which I love. Cartridge converter, you know, Sailor proprietary system going on there. It's an ebonite base pen with Urushi lacquer over top of it. So it uses the Tamenuri technique of lacquer. It's multiple layers. And it looks like, I haven't seen it in person yet, but it looks like slightly different color underneath on the base layer, maybe at the very edges there. But I don't know. You can look at the pictures and see for yourself. But it's got the Rodin, which is awesome. So Nami means waves in Japanese. So it's kind of like a wave effect that they were going for with these, you know, abalone shell that they kind of sprinkle in there. So very beautiful looking pen, $2,400. So it's definitely in limited edition collector price territory. But this is a pen that I would definitely carry around and use regularly because it is going to look awesome. All right, let's move on. So you can check out our new arrivals and coming soon stuff on our website if you want to see what else is going on, because I record this on Monday and it's already Friday by the time you're seeing this, or maybe later. So you can get the most current up-to-date information directly on our website. All right, let's do company updates. All right, this will be brief. Really, the thing I mostly have to talk about is a video that we got out earlier this week. This is the best pens in every price point, which we did a couple of years ago, but I updated it, pulled some different numbers. So this is based off of what's actually sold in the last 365 days before recording the video. So it's very interesting to see kind of what ends up in there. And I did a little differently this time. The first time we did it, we pulled it literally just like pen color, like within a model. So there was some stuff that like maybe the model as a whole isn't the most popular, but the color that came out was really popular. And so some interesting things made the list. This time I rounded everything up and I was like, let's go with pen model as a whole. Round all the colors up and see what happens. And yeah, got some interesting results. So I have like, I think eight different categories for pricing there. So go check that one out. Should be pretty fun. All right, let's do some questions. Okay, first question we have. This is from Herbert Schultz, 9468. It says, what causes feedback? Not scratchy nib, which is usually due to misaligned tines. I have a giant fake nib to make this more visually appetizing. So here's our big fake nib. So not bad, right? So the white is the tipping that you can see on here. So, you know, every nib looks slightly different, but you will get the main idea. So if you look kind of straight on at the nib, you know, these are the two tines. And usually what you're talking about, a misaligned tines, is when you have one that's slightly above or slightly below the other. This can happen with any pen. This can happen, you know, especially if you're like messing with it or drop it or something like that. Sometimes if the feed is shifted over in a certain direction, you know, more to one side than the other, if the feed is pressing up on the nib at all, it can force the tines up a little bit. So you got to make sure your feed, you know, underneath the nib would be properly centered. That'll help with that. But sometimes it can literally just be as somebody was adjusting it or whatever, just one of the tines is slightly higher than the other. You can't always bend it down so easily, you know, I guess unless you take the nib out of the pen because you got the feed in the way backing up. So it's usually easier to bend the tine up a little bit and just get them aligned. So, you know, you want to look straight on like this. You know, having a loop definitely makes that possible at all. It's really hard to do with the naked eye unless you have like a double broad or something and you can sort of get there, but it's hard. Yeah, so that's usually what you will see. Now, there are two reasons why you might have, you know, toothiness or feedback on a pen. You know, obviously you have the alignment thing, which could be something, but there's two other reasons. And that's why I wanted to grab the little demo pen thing. So the first one is when they initially cut the slit for these tines. So it's like the steps for making a nib, there's a whole bunch of steps, but basically once you have the nib plate itself and you need to do the tipping, the slit is not yet cut. There will be a breather hole, not with all nibs, but if there is a breather hole, that will already be there. And there will not be a slit, and then they will weld on the tip before they cut the slit. So weld on the tip, okay, it can look like whatever. Usually it ends up getting shaped and polished and stuff afterwards once the slit's already cut. So then they use a very, very fine, it's essentially like paper, like it's paper that's just spun really, really, really fast, that cuts the slit into the metal, into the tines, you know. And on a nib like this, if it has a breather hole, they're going to cut all the way up to the breather hole. It's a nice place for it to stop. But what happens is because it's this spinning disc that's moving like this and cutting, you know, every nib that I've ever seen, I don't know literally if every nib is made this way, but I think so. When they cut it, the wheel is turning this direction, right, as it goes to cut the slit. So what happens if you ever cut anything out of metal, you know that, you know, it's going to heat up. They usually wet it and all that kind of stuff, but you're going to end up with metal that's getting displaced. So when that happens, you can end up with a burr, you know, which is just like a little extra hanging piece of metal that can happen. And that burr will be right at the bottom, right? Because the wheel is spinning in this direction. So it leaves a little bit of burr there. Now that burr needs to be deburred, you know. Basically there's handwork that you have to do at this point. Maybe there's some machinery that can help with this, but usually, especially on like gold nibs and stuff, it's done by hand. So what you do is you know, bend up one of the tines and then you take like a buff stick or something like that. Let me see if I don't have a giant buff stick to demonstrate, but you know, here's my little nail file buff stick thing. You can get these literally at places where you get nail files. So yeah, you just kind of take and you kind of scrape that part right there, and you're just getting rid of that burr. Yeah, and then you do it on the other side as well. You know, usually if you have a bad scratch, that's often the case, is there is a burr. It can come from misalignment, but often it could be paired both. If that wasn't deburred right, then that can definitely cause a scratch, even if it's aligned properly. So if it does get deburred, but it's, you know, there's different degrees to which you can do that. You know what I mean? So if there's like a little bit of a burr, or maybe you take the burr off, but it's still, you know, fairly sharp, that can make it feel more feedbacky. It's not necessarily cutting the paper, but it could be just enough to give you some drag on the page. So that is one thing that can cause that, is depending on how much that like inside portion right here where the slit is cut, how much that gets rounded off. And if you've ever heard the term baby's bottom, that's where it's really rounded off, so much so, in order to make it feel smoother, because the more you do that, the smoother it's going to feel. But if you round it off too much, you can actually end up with a gap at the bottom that looks like a baby's bottom, the crack, if you will. And the ink can actually have a hard time making it all the way down to the page because the capillary action is not carrying it all the way down because there's too much of a gap. So that's what baby's bottom is. And you have to smooth it all out and get rid of the bottom, right? So it's a fine balance. And when you're working with stuff that's like super, super, super tiny, it can be really tough, especially on like extra fine and fine nibs. So this takes a lot of practice, takes a lot of experience, but you need to deburr and have a little bit of that inside part rounded, but not too much. So depending on how rounded, how smoothed out that inside portion is, that can make a big difference in terms of how the nib feels on the page. And then the other aspect of it is just the overall tipping of the nib, So obviously you can use mechanical devices. You can use either like a disc or like a diamond, disc, or you can use like a spinning wheel, some kind of abrasive wheel, and you're smoothing the nib that way. Or you can just use you can do it, by hand. It takes a little longer, but it's more fine tuning using something like a buff stick like this. So, basically you're rubbing it kind of all over the thing, particularly like on the bottom part that you're going to actually be touching to the paper. And, a buff stick like this can be a good example. You can't necessarily feel the texture, but, on this particular one, different sticks have different grits on them and different colors that are used, depending on which one you're getting. This particular one, the pink is going to be the more aggressive grit. The white is less, it's like in the middle. And then the gray here is more like a micro mesh. Like if you've ever seen the micro mesh that we sell, this is kind of what you're getting. But there's different grades of micro mesh even, and then you get into mylar paper, which is like, you're literally getting like less than a micron of, size of abrasive on these things. So basically, whenever you're smoothing out any kind of metal, this is true in nibs, but it's also true in literally any other type of metal that you're doing. When you're polishing metal, you have to basically polish the whole thing, and then you go to the next finer grit, and then you polish it again. And then you go to the next finer grit and you polish it again. And I mean, I know from my pen making days, micro mesh, just in and of itself, I have a kit that has 12 different grades of micro mesh, the finest one being the 12,000, which is what we sell in sheets. But then you can go to mylar paper. We have 2 different grits of mylar paper. So, I mean, when you're starting out, you can literally go a dozen or 2 dozen different grades if you want to get it super smooth, super polished. It takes a lot of time. And not everybody necessarily wants it that smooth. So you combine it with, if you're a manufacturer and you are trying to make, how economically you make everything is largely how, efficient and profitable and sustainable your company's going to be. So there's a fine balance they have between polishing and polishing and polishing and spending a ton of time polishing the tip of that nib. Versus how much are you charging for the pen? Are you getting paid for that time? So companies are going to have to do that. So, there's going to be a fine point that every company has to kind of determine for themselves, of how much time do you spend polishing that nib and how smooth do you make it versus how much time does it take and how much do you charge for that time for that pen. So it's going to be different for every company. Some go much smoother, others not as smooth. Some of it may depend on just what does that company want to have as the feel for their nib. So one company, I'm just, I don't know specifically what any company, because this is like super proprietary stuff in terms of how each company would do their own specific process. But the general principle is the same. You cut the slit, you deburr it, and then you smooth it to whatever degree that you want to, and then you stop. But say you only smooth it to a 3600 grit micro mesh, that is going to feel more feedbacky, feel more toothy on the page than it would if you go to a 12,000 grit versus a micro mesh 0.3 micron, which is going to be the smoothest of anything that, at least the materials that we have. So in anything, that's the smoothest of any material I know that people use, that nibmeisters use, is that micro mesh, that mylar. So, basically it's like, do you feel like going 6 steps of smoothness or 12? Is that going to be worthwhile? Some people really love it to be super, super buttery smooth. Not everybody does though. Some people like it to have a little bit of grab to the page because they feel like they're just going to slip right off the page if they don't have something to grab onto. So every manufacturer's got to come up with their own way, but basically, that deburring and then the overall smoothness that tipping is brought to are going to be the things that determine how smooth or how feedbacky your nib is. There you go. Okay, next question. This is from Marianne Hummel. Hello, Marianne. I love that you ask so many questions because I keep choosing them. Okay. What I love about your website, second only to Glenn's amazing photography. Hear that, Glenn? I will tell him. Is all the specs given for the pens? Can you elaborate on the process of compiling them for a bit or maybe a lot? For instance, when a grip is measured, is it the smallest part or the widest part? Likewise, the barrel. How do you measure ink capacity? Is it by the size of the cartridge or converter? The specs are much appreciated. Sure, I can do a little deep dive on some of these tech specs. Let's see, I want to make sure that I have the right pens on hand. I think I got some that I can demonstrate. Try and pick some interesting ones. So yeah, let's talk about these specs. So if you look on our product page, the tech specs are not in the first tab. So this is like underneath where all the pictures are. There's a product description, but then you tab over and it gives you all the tech specs. So if you didn't know that was there, oh my gosh, your world has opened up because we have so many specs. And this is not anything that is given to us. There's no standardization that's given to us from manufacturers on this type of thing. This is a Goulet Pens thing that we developed. Now, of course, anybody else can just look at the specs that we've done and steal them. Measurements are not proprietary. So that's why I'm like, well, somebody's going to steal those specs. That's way easier than trying to copy our process of how we do them. So why don't I just show you how we do them? Because then maybe you'll appreciate a little bit more. So I'm going to step you through how we do these different measurements. So we've been doing this for a long time. Very long time. We didn't always have super, super detailed specs, but pretty early on we developed all these specs because it's like, we keep getting questions about all these different aspects of a pen. Why don't we just measure it and then, then people know and we empower them through education, which is one of our core values. So yeah, that's what we do. And now when we get a new pen in, we're like, oh my gosh, we have so many measurements to do. So we definitely have a standardized process for this. There's documentation, there's everything. I definitely kicked it off and made sure to get these things all standardized because back when we didn't have that many people, I was doing it all. But now, thankfully, I'm like a backup to doing these measurements. I'm not the primary, that's Crystal. So anyway, let me show you what we do. So we have several different things. If you look on the tech specs, you'll see like, okay, is it a fountain pen? Yes. What color is it? Some of these are basic stuff. Is it a demonstrator? What's the body material type? So these are not things that need to be measured. These are just kind of facts that happen. Next thing we get into is cap rotations, right? How do we measure cap rotations? Well, on this Diplomat Viper, it's a snap cap, so there's no rotations. So we wouldn't have anything there, but let's go with this TWSBI Eco, right? So how many cap rotations is this? It's pretty easy to measure. So literally, I just put my thumb right there where the clip is, and then I rotate it. There's, not quite one. So it's like, 3/4. That's a pretty good cap rotation there. Let me see if I have one that is more rotations. Let's see here. Got a Delta Butterfly here, which we sold all of these and we don't have any more. So I'm sorry. Don't fall in love with this one. So if I do this, you see, okay, just right about one rotation. I don't remember if we called that 1 or 1 1/4. I want to try to find something that was a little more dramatically different. Let's see here. We got this Conklin 1898. How about this one? Okay, there we go. 1 1/2. So literally just hold my thumb in place, count how many rotations that it is. And that's how that measurement's done. That one's pretty straightforward. Let's see here. What else we got? Compatible inks and refills. That is based on what we test, and that information might be given to us. Cap rotations is never given to us. We always have to do that one. Filling mechanism, that's pretty straightforward. Grip material, that's again just what is the material. We don't have to measure for that per se. We do have to ask sometimes what that is. Nib size, that's easy. Nib color, nib material, all that kind of stuff. Is it postable? So that's a tricky one because sometimes there are things that are technically postable, but if it's not like a super secure posting, and we don't feel confident saying it's postable, we might say no, and then put something in the product description saying like, technically it's postable, but we don't recommend it. That's the case with the Banu Daily Mates. They will post, but they're like fluted and they're tapered. So it's like you really have to kind of mash it on. And then if it does loosen up, it'll kind of like shoot itself off the pen. So we were like, oh, let's just say that it's not. It's really long anyway. So like, let's just not call this one postable. So we do have to kind of make a judgment call there. That's always something that we need to, if it's borderline, we'll kind of talk amongst our team and see. Let's see here. What else? Okay, now we get into like the actual physical measurements. Okay. So we got a couple different things. We got the diameter measurement. We have a length measurement. We have a weight measurement, and then we have ink capacity. Those are the main measurements that we're looking for on a pen, right? So let's start out with diameter. So this, we are using calipers, digital calipers. You know, they're fairly readily available, and they get pretty darn precise. So, you know, a set of calipers like this, you turn it on, you know, so we would clamp it all the way down, zero it out. And then, I mean, this goes to 1/100th of a millimeter. That's pretty darn specific. So, you know, starting out with, okay, diameter of the body. So we're going for the thickest part of the body. That's what we're going for, because in the context of why you would care about the diameter of the body, usually it's going to be like going into a pen case or a pen sleeve or something like that, in which case the thickest part of it is going to matter the most. So, you know, on this Delta, you know, it's fairly uniform, but it feels like it's fattest back here, right where that trim ring is. So I would just set it right in there. Boom, do the measurement, 15.67. So I might round it to like the nearest 1/10 of a millimeter, because let's be honest, even that is pretty darn specific. And then, you know, we measure everything in millimeters, but then we'll convert it to inches just because, you know, that would maybe be helpful for some people. But millimeters is more precise. So that's why we like to do the initial measurement in millimeters. And then it's going to be the same thing with the cap. You know, again, it's pretty straightforward. This one, we just kind of look, okay, what is the thickest part, maybe at the center band? We might measure in a couple different places. But then you also have the clip, right? So that if you have a, you know, if you got a pen case that has this kind of thing going on, you know, it's like, okay, this will fit in here, but the clip is kind of big too. So how thick is that? You know, is that measurement particularly really matter? I don't know, maybe not. But then basically you just go on the body and you go with the thickest part of the clip, and then you get that measurement. Pretty straightforward, right? Grip diameter. Now this is the weird one, right? Because there can be lots of different grips. So going with this Delta here, let's go with Diplomat Viper. That will be an interesting one because it's tapered. And then let's see here. I wanted to show a Lamy. Do I have a Lamy on hand? I might have to get up and go grab one. BRB. I found one. Okay. So All-Star is an interesting one because it has a triangular sort of grip. So it's also a little bit tapered. So grip is one thing that's kind of weird, because how do you give one measurement for something like this that is tapered, but then it flares up at the end? So it's a judgment call. But basically we will take the thinnest part of the grip, and that's usually our measurement, because that's honestly where your hand is going to be more gravitated towards holding. Now, I hold my pen back kind of like this. So the diameter maybe isn't the most helpful or relevant part for me. You know, and if I'm holding it further back, it's actually going to be closer to the body measurement. That's really tough to tell. So you might have to make a judgment call and look at the pen and see like, oh, okay, the thicker part of the grip here is closer to the body diameter. So maybe I'll look at that measurement. But when you get into something like the Viper, well, that's weird because it's tapered and it's a hooded nib, so it tapers down to a very fine point. Well, where exactly is the diameter on this thing? So what we end up doing, again, it's kind of a judgment call. A couple of us will hold the pen in our hands and see like, where is the natural place where our fingers fall, and we'll measure that. So not the most specific thing in the world, but it generally ends up being about 3/4 of the way down on the thing. So, you know, we would take that, do that measurement. Okay, 9.3, sure. Let's go with that. And then that would be the call. Some people are going to hold it a little closer down. Other people are going to hold it further back, but it gives us a fairly good baseline. Now a pen that has a triangular section like this Lamy, we would measure the flat part because that's where your fingers are actually going to land. So if you're measuring the rounded part, you're going to get a thicker measurement. So, you know, if I measure at the rounded part, you know, right here, that's going to be, you know, 10.59. But if I measure on the flat part, look at that. That's, 8.95. So that could be a meaningful difference. So that's what I would go with, is around that 8.95-ish range. I guess you can double check me on that and see if that actually is our measurement. It may be slightly different. I'm just kind of running and gunning here. But that's basically how we do the grip measurements. So if the grip measurements seem way off to you, just know that we've made a judgment call. And if you're measuring it, you may be measuring it slightly different than we are, and that's okay. Again, none of this is standardized. We're just making all this up. So we try to standardize how we measure it so that at least we're presenting something somewhat consistent to you. All right, now length. This part's pretty easy, right? Length, you know what length is. Again, zero it out. Length, let's see, our overall length. I would just, have this thing go all the way out, and I would measure the length, so I'd measure it closed, measure it uncapped, so just the body. And this would be like from the very tip to the base. And then the cap length is pretty easy there. And then length posted as well, because some things post deeper than others. So we would measure from the tip of the nib to the top here to get the posted length. And then nib length. So this is, something that can often be confusing as well. Seems everything around the grip can be confusing. So nib length is going to be the exposed nib from the end of the grip section where the nib starts. If you have a hooded nib, or if you have something like a, vanishing point where that nib is longer, but it's mostly hidden in there, we're only measuring the part that you see when you're going to be writing with the pen, right? So that's the standard we go with. So on this one, it would be basically from the edge of the grip to the tip, and sometimes you have to approximate a little bit, get it close. It's like 23 millimeters. This is a number 6 nib. So anything where it's like the base of the nib is kind of standard and it's to the top, it's going to be around that 23-ish millimeter length. A pen like this guy, it's going to be a lot shorter. Whoops, I just popped off a little piece of it. It's going to be a lot shorter. So here I would literally go from the tip of the grip that you can see there to the tip of the nib, and it's going to be, like 2.5 to 3 millimeters, right? So not very much, because there's not very much showing. Kind of the same thing with something like the Vanishing point. Lamy, it would be the same kind of thing. I would do it from, this part of the grip out here. You're looking at somewhere around 16, right? So that's how you do that. What did I do with this thing? I think I just slipped off the... Okay. I don't know why that removes. Anyway. Okay, next measurement we have, let's see here, overall length, close, okay, weight. Okay, that's the next thing. So for the scale, we will use, just a little pocket scale. We have a couple different types of scales, but essentially the process is going to be the same for all of these. This one is pretty precise. This goes to a 100th of a gram, which is really not much weight, so we can kind of zero it out. So with weight, again, we're just weighing the different components of the pen. So one like this, you would literally just measure the whole pen. There you go, 30 grams, cap, boom, and then body, boom. The body and the cap separately should weigh the same as the overall, but you never know. I mean, you definitely should. Sometimes when we're rounding, it may not exactly add up because of the rounding, but it should be the same. That's it for weight. That's pretty straightforward, Ink capacity. Now, this is the most complicated thing to measure that is super involved and a huge pain. This one, we have to use a spreadsheet to keep track of all this. But let's go back to our Delta friend here. Okay, so when I'm going to measure the ink capacity, you might be thinking, okay, well, why not just fill the pen with ink or water or whatever, and then dump it into like a vial or something like that and measure it. I mean, you could do that, but there's going to be some residue, some liquid that's left in the pen. Is that truly accurate? And also, again, it's going to be kind of hard to see. I guess you could put it in like a very, very thin graduated cylinder to try and get that measurement, but there's actually a better way to do this, and it's by weighing it. So as it happens to be, ink is mostly water, so we can pretty much just call it water. And water has a density of 1 gram per milliliter. So that ends up working out pretty nicely. So literally you can just weigh out the water, and however many grams it is going to be however many milliliters of ink that is being held. So on a pen like this, what we would do, this is a cartridge converter pen. Now this one, I've already got ink in it, so this is for demonstration purposes only. I would zero it out. So I would take just the grip of the pen, empty, and I would weigh that out. That happens to be exactly 4 grams. Now, I would then take and fill it till it can't hold any more. We use water just because it's easier to clean, but it would be ink. And then I would weigh it again. So I'm not really going to demonstrate that here because I don't have time, but the difference in weight would be how much ink is held in the grip of the pen. And then we would have that measurement. So whatever that measurement is, it's going to be like half of a milliliter or something like that. It's approximately maybe 0.4 milliliters. Depends on the pen, depends on the size of the feed and the grip and all that kind of stuff. It varies from pen to pen. But we would have that measurement as its own. Next, what we would do is we would take this particular pen. This is a Delta. It is Standard International. So I have 3 different things that I could be using to fill this pen. So I'm going to have 3 different ink capacities. So I'm going to have one for the converter. So I would do the same thing. I would measure the empty converter. I would measure this converter completely filled with water. That difference is going to be the ink capacity. Now, it's going to be the same for something like a Standard International. The converter is going to be the same for every single pen. So I would, have that in the spreadsheet. So if I need to measure out the ink capacity for this, I don't need to go and do the ink capacity for the converter because I've already got that done and stored. So we have a spreadsheet for that reason. And then it would be the same thing for the short cartridges and the long cartridges. Again, you're just weighing the difference, whether it's full or empty. Once you've done the grip on something like this that's Standard International, all we would have to do is do the ink capacity of the grip, and then we would just add it to the short, the long, and the Standard International converter, and that gets you the ink capacities for all of our different ones. So that works out really nicely for pens like that. If it was an eyedropper convertible pen, this one is not because it's got metal components in there. But let's say we have a different pen that is eyedropper convertible. I'm seeing if I have anything handy. I don't see anything in my immediate grabbing distance that is eyedropper convertible. But if I was going to eyedropper convert something, well, then I would have to fill up the body of the pen with ink or water, weigh that out, and then add that to the grip, filled. And that would get us our full ink capacity of an eyedropper conversion. If it's a piston filling pen, that's pretty straightforward because there's only one way that you can max that thing out. So we would max it, fill it all the way, measure the variance, and that gets us our measurement. Same thing with a vac filler. With a vac filler, I will say, again, here we go. Vac filler, such as our TWSBI, VAC 700 here. Now, when you just go to fill, you fill the thing, it only fills up, maybe 2/3 of the way, 3/4 if you're really skillful. But that's not our full ink capacity, right? So we will then use, like an ink pot, either a Visconti traveling inkwell or the Peniter inkwell. And we will, pump this thing full of ink so that it's absolutely full. That is the measurement that we give for a vac filler. Same thing with pistons, honestly, because usually when you're just drawing up from a bottle, you can't absolutely max it out, but we totally max and fill it out. That's the measurement that we do for ink capacity. So whatever ink capacity we do for whatever pen, it is as much ink as that thing could possibly hold in a natural way, in a way that you could possibly fill it. That is the measurement that we will give. And I think that's it. I think I covered everything, right? Did I miss anything? Cap rotations. I mentioned the spreadsheet. I'm not going to share that spreadsheet with you all because that's very proprietary. Sorry for all of our ink capacities and stuff like that. Yeah, I think I got everything. Woo! That was a lot. Anyway, now you know. The mystery is resolved. It's revealed, removed, whatever. It's not mysterious anymore. There you go. Next question. Last question. I'm only doing 3 this week. Sharon Beck says, cool ink. Talking about the Sheaffer coffee ink that I did last week. Does the Sheaffer purple ink dry as fast as the coffee? I mentioned that, wow, it dries so fast. Should I? No, it wasn't last week. It was a couple weeks ago. Sorry, it's when I did the legacy. Anyway, the coffee ink really dried fast. So I thought, you know what? Let me compare it to the other Sheaffers, because I think I mentioned in the video, I was like, oh, I think this dries faster than the other Sheaffer colors, but I didn't actually test it. So why don't I just go ahead and test it for you real quick. So let's do that. I'm going to get my Rhodia paper. You know what? We're just going to leave that on there. This is what I did. This is the same sheet of paper that I used last week for the Lord of the Rings that I was doing. So I don't feel like cleaning out a whole pen. So this is maybe not the most scientific way to go about it, but it'll get us a pretty good idea. This is Pilot Iro Utsushi, excuse me, dip pen, $20. You get a nib, honestly, just the nib is not bad. But you get a holder, there's a couple different colors of them. This is the wood one. And yeah, I can just dip it in here and then make it pretty easy to clean out my pen. So let's start off with the coffee. So you can see, kind of looks like the coffee ink right there, but it's not. Okay, so now I anticipate I'm gonna have a hard time even measuring out how quickly. I'm not gonna actually measure it out per second. We're just gonna go kind of experiential subjective here, but it dries basically instantly. I mean, I have to like race to try to smear it. That's ridiculous. Some of the fastest dry time I think I've ever seen in my life. That's so fast. That's so fast. And now I need to clean it off. And I realize I didn't, I put like some stuff in my water here. Normally I just use my drinking water, but I need to go get some water. So I will be right back. Man, this coffee smell, it is strong. Doesn't smell bad, but it is noticeable. Okay. So you saw that was pretty darn fast, right? So let's see what happens. Ugh. Trying to tear my paper towel roll with one hand. Okay. Let's see what happens when I do the Sheaffer purple. We'll start with the purple. I also grabbed the turquoise too. You know, just why not? I had it handy. I figured it would only take a few seconds. Let's see. I did use a purple. That's actually the first thing, just that I inked up the Legacy, the Sheaffer Legacy. Okay, let's go. Not the same. Not the same dry time. You can tell even just how it goes down that it's not spreading out nearly as much. Like I'm using literally, this is a medium nib. It's the same nib, clearly, because you saw me right with both. Look at that. I got a little bit of still, even with like 30 seconds there. So yeah, does not perform the same at all in any way whatsoever. That purple is going to smear way more than the brown. This is why I was so shocked when I inked up the brown for the first time. I was like, holy moly. But also you see like how different that line looks compared to each other. You know what I mean? So pretty big difference there. I would have to get a lot more official to do like a proper dry time, which we do when we do ink reviews. Let's do the turquoise just to see. I imagine the turquoise is going to be closer to, excuse me, it's going to be closer to the purple than it will to the brown. I imagine that whatever it is that has the scent in the coffee is what's making that absorb so much quicker. Okay, we'll just give that a few seconds. Oh yeah. Very, very different than the brown. Let that set for a bit. By the way, these things are great. If you don't like glass pens, you want something a little more specific. In fact, I think this is what I should use now for, this was already recommended to me to use for the ink showdowns. I think I really should use this because it's a lot more consistent than the glass pens. Okay. I yabbered on for a while, but it's going to be more similar to the purple as opposed to the brown. So yeah, there you go. The brown is weird in so many ways. I think I haven't used like dip tested like this with all the other Sheaffer inks, but from my experience previously with Sheaffer inks that I've used, they're all going to be pretty similar to these two. So again, these are not like super long dry time. This is just normal. Especially on a more ink resistant paper like Rhodia, dry time's a little longer. And this is just a medium pilot nib, so it's pretty middle of the road, maybe even on the finer side. But yeah, there you go. Now we know. It's weird. All right, now it's time for the pen spotlight, or the 3-pen spotlight, I should say, because, well, I have one model, but I have 3 pens to show you. So this is the Platinum Curidas, which is a model that we carried, came out during COVID. Things got weird. We didn't have them for a little while. They kind of lost some of their popularity, so we didn't carry them. But these new colors were kind of interesting, so we're picking them up again. If these are popular, we'll keep them. If not, they're special editions. They'll go away, and this model will be dead to us. But it's a decent pen. I don't mind it. I think it gets compared so much to the Vanishing Point that it's hard not to compare it. Here's the packaging and everything, which looks pretty decent. So there's 3 colors. There's the Iolite, which is like a violet color. There's Labradorite and Sphene. So we'll show you each of those. This is the Iodite, the violet one. It's pretty cool. So it's a plastic pen, but it has a metallic finish to it. It's like a color shifty kind of thing. So it's got like a green to purple kind of color shift, it looks pretty rad, right? Like, honestly, I'm a sucker for this type of color shiftiness. You don't see this a lot on pens. We have like our Diplomat Prismatic Purple has kind of this effect a little bit, but not even this drastic. I just think it looks really rad. So let's see here. What other stuff comes in here? We've got a converter, which is nice because the Platinum converters are not cheap, and it's got a cartridge. So let's move all these to the side. Converter, it's got a silver converter, which is nice because the trim is silver. Let's pull this thing out. Ta-da! All right, so this is a retractable nib pen, which is cool. Unscrew the back, and then you push this in, give it a little twist. So it's kind of like a little maze that you got to do with this little part here. Pull that out, and now you have your nib. You got to watch out for the spring because it will spring out on you. And then it's got this other little latch right here, which you do. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. I know we can do that in post-production, but I'm having a hard time seeing what I'm doing. So it's got that little dog leg that you got to do there with this little nub. And then you can either use the cartridge or you put the converter on here. So this is how you would fill the pen, just like you would any other pen. The breather hole is going to be right about there. So this nib is not super long. Pretty easy to fill out of any bottle. So you'd fill it, and then you would put this shroud back on because this is how it's going to retract in and out of the pen. So you would just line up the silver dot there with this little dog leg that locks into place. And then you have your spring in place here. So you just kind of fit it in your spring. And then it is going to have this little post, this little gray post, fits in there like that, spins around. And then as you click it in and out, it's going to go up in that little section there. So it's got like a little U-shaped channel, and it fits in like that. And then this part, is just like a mechanical pencil kind of end. And then, boom. So it clicks in and out. Easy to use with one hand. Now the travel is longer than on a Vanishing Point. The Vanishing Point is much shorter. Let me grab mine because I have it right behind me here. Vanishing Point's heavier because it's brass. This is lighter because it's plastic. So if you don't like the weight of the Vanishing Point, Curidas is actually going to be a little better for you. But you just look at the end here, like the travel distance for the Vanishing Point is going to be shorter than the Curidas. So that's just a thing to be aware of. The nice thing about this, though, is you can remove the clip. Now, I think there was, at least on the older ones, there used to be like a special tool maybe that it came with. I don't see a special tool with this one. So I don't know. You can just use your finger, honestly, and kind of pry it off. If I can actually do it. Let's see. Oh, maybe. Am I missing something? Oh man, maybe it's a little trickier than I'm making it out to be. There definitely used to be a way to pry this thing off. See, now I'm like determined to do it. Yeah, they used to have this little plastic tool that you would use to be able to do that. Huh. Okay, well, there may be a way to do that. I will have to follow up and see if there's a way. I really don't have any fingernails. That's part of my problem. But I thought you could just like kind of snap it off of there. There we go. See where there's a will, there's a way. And then I think, does it like slide under there? Boom. Nailed it. Nailed it! Ha ha! Anyway. Okay, so that was kind of a pain, but I got it done. So yeah, you still end up with this little part right here that sticks out, but the clip is removable if you're determined enough. So if the clip really bothers you, there's still these little pegs that you end up kind of holding. So maybe that would bother you. I don't know. It's definitely less bothersome than having a clip there. So you'll just have to determine for yourself if that really matters to you. And then I imagine reinstalling it is going to be a little easier. You know, I kind of slide that under. Oh, that's super duper easy. So it's way easier to install it than it is to take it off. And then it's cool. It's got this little like trap door here. Kind of looks like a fish, like a talking bass, like. And then it's like, here's the nib. Gotta love those sound effects, right? Yeah, so there you go. This is a fine nib. I think I have fine nibs for all of these. I don't remember actually which nibs are available. I will look it up right now and tell you. Fine and medium. There you go. I have nib nooks that show these, how they are. To be completely honest with you, I am late for dinner for my family, so I'm not going to ink it up because I'll ink it up. Okay, I'll ink one up. All I have is the fine. I don't have the medium. I don't have time to go grab one. I'll ink one up. Let's look at the other two colors, though. This is the Labradorite, and this is the Sphene. The Sphene is green. So it's like green with kind of like a reddish tinge to it, kind of like a coppery reddish kind of tinge, which is cool. And then this one is really cool. This one is like a pink to a teal, pink to turquoise, teal. So they all look fairly different. I mean, not worlds different, but they all have the similar effects, but they are different colors, and that's kind of neat. So let's go ahead and, I said I didn't have time, but I'm going to do it anyway. Let's ink it up. I'm going to ink it up with Robert Oster Tranquility because I said that I was going to use this ink more after I did the teal ink showdown, and I did ink up one pen with it, but I have not used it nearly as much as I feel that I should. Oh, look at that. You can leave the shroud on, actually. So when you go to fill the pen, you don't have to actually disassemble the whole darn thing. So that's cool. Okay, filling, pretty easy. And it's nice because it's super duper thin. So you're not going to have trouble getting this into any bottle whatsoever, which is nice. It's kind of like a vanishing point. The vanishing point, comes apart and, you fill it like that. So a very, very similar kind of experience. Installation of the vanishing point nib is maybe a little bit simpler, but still, this thing's like half the price. $96 for this pen. There you go. Got it all linked up. Let's give it a write. And I imagine the fine nib will probably be most appealing for a lot of you. Boom. Let's see here. Platinum. Curidas. Nib is nice and smooth. Wow, that's a very fine nib. I mean, this is a Pilot Medium over here, but look how fine that fine nib is. Platinum Curidas. This is the SE. Which color was this again? I got them all mixed up. Iolite. Iolite. My capital I's look really weird. Okay. But that is pretty darn fine. And it's very smooth. Especially, I don't have to put much pressure on it at all. I'll be honest with you, the pen writes better than I remember it. I have not used this pen in a while. That's a very, very smooth, fine nib. I don't hate that at all. I might just have to use this now. Now that I got my Robert Oster Tranquility in there, which looks nice and teal. So there you go. Inked it up, wrote with it, super smooth, writes well, flow is good, very fine nib. And overall, not a bad pen for $96, to be quite honest with you. What can you buy for $96 today? It is very light, though. I think that was part of the reason that maybe it wasn't as popular as I feel that it should have been, is a lot of people, especially in the US, just equate weight with quality. It's not the way that it is in Japan, honestly. But give it a shot. I think it's different enough from a Vanishing point. Style is different, doesn't have a gold nib, but honestly, it doesn't need it because it writes great. So that's my review of the Curidas. All right, let's talk about Brian's adventures, shall we? I don't have a lot to talk about. We did have the mental health half day last week, which I had a mixed mental health day. I won't get into all the details of this, but we live in a neighborhood that has a small HOA because it's a private road and we have to maintain the road. Long story short, there's all kinds of paperwork and stuff that is very much out of sorts. Our HOA president, if you will, retired, resigned, I guess. So my poor neighbor, sweet older lady, she has been the secretary for like 30 years of this poor little organization. And everybody else has resigned. No one wants to deal with it, basically. So somebody's got to do something. So Rachel and I are kind of stepping up and like, all right, we'll help sort this out. But yeah, we spent like 2.5 hours going through 30 years worth of paperwork for this little HOA. It's such a blast. I know all of you who have an HOA just love it and love having to deal with it, especially if you've ever served on it. So we kind of stepped in and was like, okay, we're doing this because somebody needs to do it. We can't just like let it go to heck. So that was fun. So we did spend time doing that, but then I went for a long bike ride after that. The weather was beautiful. I did like a 20-mile ride. It was awesome. My butt was very sore because I do not typically go on rides that long these days. Normally I'm doing like 8 to 10 mile rides. I've done some 14, every now and then. Back when I was riding like crazy, man, I would go on like 30 mile, 50 mile rides regularly. My big heavy butt is not taking that so well these days. Plus it just takes a lot of time. But I did go for a 20-mile ride and it was great. So that was my mental health thing. Had another drum lesson on Saturday and working on gospel chops. If you are a drummer, you might know what gospel chops are. Other people probably not. But basically, if you listen to gospel music, oh my gosh, the drumming is insane. And lots of syncopation, very jazz influenced, very, very fast stuff, lots of fills, very technical, but also very, artistic, and you get the feel of it. So I'm really having fun. It's super hard, but I'm having fun learning how to do some of that. Let's see here. Rachel, she's a gamer, I guess technically. Doesn't identify as such maybe, but she plays a lot of video games. That's her way of like unwinding and getting restoration. So we got a Switch 2, which is fine. If you have a Switch and you're looking to get a Switch 2, I would say wait. It's not so revolutionary that it's worth upgrading unless you particularly want the couple of games that are out there for Switch 2. The Mario Kart's pretty cool, but it's definitely not worth getting the whole platform just for. I don't know, this is my opinion. But they came out with a new Donkey Kong game. I don't even remember what, Donkey Kong Bonanza, I think it's called. Anyway, I literally have yet to play this game, but I hear it in the background a lot and I watch it and it's pretty neat. You basically just destroy everything and you're punching stuff all the time. And it's a pretty fun kind of concept. Very much kind of like a Mario Odyssey kind of a feel to the game, except it's Donkey Kong and it's bananas and you're just destroying everything everywhere you go. So that's kind of fun. So that's what I listen to in the background now as I'm doing other things. And then weather's been great around here. So I pulled a lot of weeds last week, washed my car, which was way overdue. And, we went as a family. We took the kids out to an all-you-can-eat buffet, which, post-COVID, there's not a lot of all-you-can-eat buffets that survived. But we have one in town here. It's just a local joint that... has held strong and, not typically known for having the greatest food, but we got 2 teenagers now. And I'm like, you know what? I don't hate letting them pick whatever the heck they want to eat, and they can eat as much of it as they want. Kind of in that stage of life where that's kind of nice, and they've got, they've got salad stuff, they've got fruit and all that kind of stuff. So like you can eat healthier there. So Rachel and I gorge ourselves on the healthier stuff, and the kids get whatever the heck else they want. So yeah, we made it a little family trip. We did that. And then the weather was great. Ellie wanted to go mini golfing. So, we did that. The weather was awesome. However, we did that right after we did the all you can eat buffet. And oh my gosh, we were all so stuffed. And when you're super stuffed, you definitely want to like stay on your feet for an hour and smack balls around. It was fun. We didn't keep score because I don't know. We just found that if we keep score, it doesn't really matter who wins or not. And just nobody has as good of a time. So we were really just making memories as a family, actually like taking some pictures of us with our kids. Cause we like never do that now because our kids never want to. And Rachel looks great. I am heavy set. And whenever I try and take selfies, I'm like, oh man, my neck is so flabby. That's why I'm riding my bike more and trying to watch my diet. But anyway, so yeah, we just had a really good time, but we were very, very stuffed. So I don't know if we'll do the all you can eat buffet mini golf combo again. I guess it could have been worse. It could be, it's not like we did like all you can eat buffet and then like trampoline park, that would be a bad combo. We're not that dumb, but it was fun. But yeah, I don't know. They keep asking for the buffet thing more. And I'm like, I used to love buffets in my younger years for exactly that reason. So I was like, you know what? Maybe we'll just incorporate this into our life a little bit more. And that's kind of it for Goulet Adventures here. My adventures, nothing too crazy, but having fun, spend a lot of time with the family, doing that kind of stuff. So, want to thank you for watching. Leave us some feedback. Let me know what questions you want me to answer in the future, and I'll take them on. Also, if there's other pens that you want to, have me demonstrate as well for spotlighting, I'm kind of picking like newer stuff that's out or something that's kind of interesting. But if you have any specific other deep track, deep cut pens that you want to just dig out of the website and have me talk about them, I can do that too. Subscribe to our stuff. You can check out gouletpens.com for all of the things that you need and want to buy, whatever. So my fun fact for this week, of course, I'm like, I've done 300 plus episodes of this. What kind of fun facts have I not covered? Well, this one was on the origins of the all-you-can-eat buffet, because I was kind of just curious. So this was, somewhat AI prompted, and I asked for cited sources, but it is kind of a hodgepodge of different sources. But I thought it was kind of interesting. So I was like, where did the all-you-can-eat buffet get started? So apparently in 16th century Sweden, it kind of started out as what was called the Brandväsbord. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but it stands for Table of Spirits. This is basically like a prelude to a meal. It was like a cacophony of different types of foods, that everybody could kind of eat from, like family style, right? Over time, that practice evolved into what was known as the smorgasbord, which you've probably heard that term before, which included both hot and cold dishes that increasingly became its own meal rather than just the prelude. So it kind of evolved a little bit. It was like, oh, I kind of like eating all this random stuff. So maybe we'll just have that be the whole meal. The smorgasbord became internationally known in the early 20th century, notably at the 1912 Stockholm Olympics and later at the 1939 New York's World's Fair at the Swedish Pavilion. So these helped to popularize it overseas and become known. So while the smorgasbord and similar displays kind of allowed people to choose among those foods, the idea of paying a fixed price to eat as much as you want, you can largely attribute to where else? America, the United States. So in the United States, the modern all-you-can-eat restaurant model is often attributed to Herb Cobb McDonald, who in 1946 introduced the idea at the Buckaroo Buffet in El Rancho, Texas, basically Las Vegas. It was designed to attract gamblers and keep them on site by offering a large spread of food at a fixed low price, which Las Vegas still does very much today. I've never been to Las Vegas. I have zero interest in going. The purpose was partly promotional, competition amongst the different, restaurants and casino things, but especially in that kind of like casino context. Offering an abundant buffet keeps people inside, keeps them spending money, keeps them in the establishment. Makes sense. And then, of course, it just went from there. So there you go. Thank you, gambling and American capitalism and overeating. But thank you, Sweden, for giving us that idea, because it's a great idea. And now my family's benefiting from it. So anyway, that's kind of a random fun fact there about all-you-can-eat buffets. I want to thank you for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me again. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Right on.